These wrenching images that you now see on the screen are taken from a clip that was posted on X by Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib in recent days. Also in recent days, some of the more extremist members of the government coalition in Israel have openly questioned whether there is, in fact, a food shortage in the Gaza Strip at all, and suggested openly that it's all a big Hamas hoax. It is important to understand that the vast majority of Israelis do not share these views, and they oppose the manner in which the government has handled the war, period, but especially now. I have no interest today in arguing over whether or not Hamas is hoarding food. We know they are. We know that some people in the Gaza Strip have plenty of food. We also know that Hamas does not give a toss about the well-being of civilians. But the strategy deployed by the Israeli government since April to withhold food and aid in order to bring down Hamas isn't exactly working as planned. It has boomeranged on Prime Minister Netanyahu spectacularly. Any human being seeing clips like these will have only one reaction: empathy and horror. Ahmed Alkhatib is from and of Gaza. Today, he lives in the United States, but is deeply involved in what is going on in the Strip. And he's also a repeat guest on this podcast. He has infinite knowledge of the situation, the people, and what they're going through. This interview was recorded 10 days ago on July 19th. And at that time, both Ahmed and I were keenly aware of the critical humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. His observations today are even more relevant. This is the third podcast in a series being put out this week by State of Tel Aviv and beyond to bring to our followers as clear, comprehensive, and accurate an understanding as possible about this unfolding crisis. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Saturday, July 19th, Ahmed Alkhatib. Thank you so much for making time for State of Tel Aviv today on somewhat short notice. 12:15 where you are in the afternoon, 7:15 p.m. where I am. How are you?
Good deal. Always a pleasure to speak to you. It's never a dull moment in what's happening in the land and with our people, but always trying to seek answers, look for solutions, talk to people on the ground, and carry on as best as one can given the circumstances.
Well, I'm really so grateful that we connected as we have. I so deeply appreciate it. And the issue we're going to discuss today is not a walk in the park by any stretch. We're going to get right to the point today and talk about this horrific humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, food shortage. I don't even know enough to begin to talk about medical, housing issues, all of that. But I really want to focus today on food and water, without which nobody can survive. And it has been horrific. Almost months since this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was sort of set up to purportedly replace UN and other food aid agencies that had been operating in the Gaza Strip. And I got plenty of criticism for UNRWA and many of the others that were operating. But if you're going to step in and overnight say, all right, you guys are gone, we're taking over, you better have your game plan. And I'm not sure that GHF did. And it's been one week after another of people going to these very few distribution points and being shot, about people being injured and stampedes, and we don't have good information. I mean, I'm sure you try to get it. I try to get it. There's a real paucity of information. And this week might have been the worst. I mean, it was just one thing after another. And I remember waking up one day to report that 20 people in the Gaza Strip had been shot and killed at one food distribution point in one incident. And I just want to say one more thing before I throw it to you, because Over 75% of Israelis want this war to end. This is a new poll. Now, yesterday, immediately, end it. Please. We don't want this to be happening, this crisis in Gaza. We don't want to be in any way responsible for it. It's enough. This war has to stop for so many reasons. You speak to family and friends in the Gaza Strip who are living this nightmare. So I want to start with that particular incident, if that's okay with you, just this week with the 20 people who were shot by we're not sure who and killed. And then we're going to zoom out.
Certainly. I mean, it has been almost like a weekly and every other day occurrence that it is actually hard to keep track of. But if you look at the common thread, there is one. There is a common thread that has to do with the location of these distribution sites being somewhat remote, way outside of urban areas, requiring that people traverse treacherous terrain that is located in combat zones. You have narrow pathways and corridors that people must stick to. Some people are unaware of the parameters of those pathways. Some people feel that, I mean, it's a first come, first serve, the distribution process, which is very much so not how this was originally envisioned with the biometric IDs or just the IDs and ensuring that there's an equitable distribution of the aid. Then you have the crowding and the very narrow points of ingress and egress. Then you have the issue of outer security being provided by Israeli soldiers who, by now, you would have thought, okay, we have troops in tanks with rifles, sniper rifles, machine guns, but they're not. This particular mission is not a combat mission. This is largely a crowd management mission. So maybe we shouldn't just have a bunch of young, exhausted kids with guns, and maybe we should have brought in other elements of the Israeli security apparatus to do a better job of managing the crowd issue so that you don't have to deploy lethal force upon the
Then I want to jump in very quickly, and because it's such an important point you raise, and make it very clear to our listeners that the IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, who was appointed a few months ago by Prime Minister Netanyahu, has made it very clear, apparently in private sessions, but also publicly, this is not, just as you said, this is not an appropriate role for the IDF. These soldiers are not trained to deal with this type of situation, and they shouldn't be doing so.
with
So
large crowds that are hungry, that are also tired, that have been traumatized for almost 2 years. And then you have the contractors themselves, UG Solutions and SRS and GHF, whom, if I may be so frank and blunt, I'm sure they're good people. I'm sure they are there thinking that we want to do the right thing. I don't think they're there actively thinking, I want to be a part of a machine that hurts people, that hurts the people of Gaza, that starves them, that, I think there is very much so an ethos of we are here to help. But beyond that, I think the execution has told a different story in terms of has it actually, I mean, you got to remember, these are small time operators, small time entities. These are all people that don't really have the kind of logistics, security expertise. The individual operators, the contractors, have distinguished backgrounds in the military, etc. But if you bring the totality of the experience of everybody involved in GHF and UG Solutions and SRS, some of whom were just stood up for this very mission of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and were used in a much smaller role during the first ceasefire earlier this year to manage the flow of vehicles through the Netzarim corridor. And so I think, unfortunately, while there is a need to scrutinize what has been going on with the humanitarian community writ large as far as their failures to speak out against Hamas's abuses of aid, their failures to acknowledge that there's been theft and looting. I mean, it's a shame that almost 2 years into the war, you still have all the international media, all the UN agencies, all the NGOs parroting an almost like singular script of there is no evidence that Hamas steals any of the aid. There is no, and I'm like, my goodness, like a kid in Gaza knows that Hamas steals the aid. Hamas shows you themselves stealing the aid. And also they do it through proxies, they do it through gangsters. Some of the gangsters are affiliated with Hamas. Then there's the businessmen. Like, but it takes a like being on the ground, it would take you like at most a week of talking to people and operating to
Right.
understand. So this is the big picture.
For the record, there is evidence. I'd seen there's video evidence of a Hamas warehouse where civilians broke in and there were Hamas
Mhm.
gunmen shooting their own people.
Precisely.
One example. There's lots of evidence of the hoarding and selling, reselling tents, food, all kinds of necessities at extortionate prices.
Precisely to fund Hamas and pay salaries. It's the only thing coming into Gaza. So it's the lifeline for not just the civilians, but for Hamas itself. And yet, instead of speaking out, and instead of, and there's a Washington Post piece coming out in a couple of days that I contributed to, describing the theft of aid and why is it that the media and the NGOs and the UN and the business people, why is it that they keep consistently saying there's no evidence, there's no theft, there's no evidence? And I was describing how they're hostages to Hamas. They're terrified. But on the other hand, they've become complacent in a way that got us to this position, that got us to where we need to have GHF and this new mechanism that has
Right.
hurting our people. So going back to GHF, I think unfortunately at this point, and there's a lot to be
Mhm.
said about where things are going in terms of after a ceasefire, if one is ever reached? Will they continue to operate in a smaller capacity? Will they go dormant for a while? Will there be the partial return to the, or partial or full return to the old mechanism? I personally, my personal assessment is that I don't see a scenario where the Israeli government necessarily agrees to the full return of the old mechanism. But then again, there's been evidence that while not done at scale, Hamas has been able to interdict some of the shipments from GHF just at
Right.
much smaller scale. They steal it from people. They send a lot of their operatives, young, capable men, that just go and just collect boxes and then they hoard them and they break them down and then they sell them. These are open-ended questions. However, for the now, one of the things that I'm looking at and I'm trying to advocate for is that without demonizing the good work that some of the, I mean, GHF has, been giving a lot of aid to people and it has been somewhat of a success for some people getting aid. So I'm not saying it's been a complete failure. However, it is unsustainable. It cannot go on like this. It has been tarnished and tainted. And there must be, I think, if we're going to be stuck in this limbo, in this aid purgatory where we can't go back to the old mechanism, we have to have a private provider. We don't know how long. There needs to be a new and a more capable set of operators, individuals, and companies
Mhm.
involved in this. And it could be a hybrid approach of maybe we incentivize some in the humanitarian community to be participants in the aid distribution through more rigorous vetting and confirmation processes and protection of the supplies, protection of the aid, monitoring. M- Maybe we bring in more capable private sector players. With all due respect to GHF, SRS, and UG Solutions, are far more capable and actually have
Right.
experience at managing risk, managing logistics, etc. So that's where I want to be forward looking and thinking about what can we do to solve this pragmatically, because everybody's saying, well, the war needs to stop right now. The war needs to stop right now.
Yeah.
I would love nothing more than the war stopping, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
So I'm really encouraged to hear that you're actually working on this and focusing because somebody competent and dedicated has to. And I think that I'm sure you would agree with the statement I'm about to make, which is that the model really has to be reinvented. Whatever was did not work. What we have now in transition does not work. Somebody has to really sit down, think hard, think carefully, and fast, bloody fast, and get a proper structure in place. I do want to make a few things really clear to our listeners. Food right now and always in the Gaza Strip is power, but especially now
Mm-hmm.
because there is almost nothing else. And so our listeners are probably thinking, well, why is Hamas withholding food from the people? Why are they exploiting civilians? Because I say they're Hamas, because they've never acted in the best interest of the civilians. It is an Islamist, fundamentalist death cult.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
And if they give food to the people, they lose control. If they withhold food, they have control. So when the UN agencies and others who had been sort of running the food distribution system in Gaza for decades were sidelined recently, that's a huge existential threat to
Mm-hmm.
Hamas. And the only thing Hamas cares about, I think, in this whole mess is surviving,
Precisely.
is being able to stand on 2 feet at the end of whatever is going on and say, we're still alive, we still have power in Gaza. The other huge problem with this GHF SRS model, but a huge problem is the very limited number, as you mentioned, of distribution points. It started initially with 2, it's now 4. They're, for reasons I don't want to get into in this podcast, try at this moment, concentrating them more in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. I think there may be 1 in the north. 2 million people. 2 million people are displaced, living in beyond squalor. They've suffered, as you said, for 2 years already. It's a miracle that so many are still alive,
Mm-hmm. Just
honestly.
barely, quite frankly.
Well, and they don't have adequate water. They don't have food. 4 distribution points for 2 million people is just a joke.
Precisely. Precisely. The thing about, I mean, this is the part that is very uncomfortable for people to talk about, but very briefly, the decision to concentrate them in the South was much more of a political one than a
Yeah.
tactical, than an operational, than a strategic, or a smart one. There was this belief that somehow you're going to be able to concentrate the population in the South, and then that will somehow either place pressure on Hamas or facilitate the Trump plan, even though Trump himself stopped talking about the plan to, get people out and they're leaving. Unfortunately, there was some political calculation on the part of some within the Israeli government that
Correct.
forced that upon the overall architecture of how GHF was designed and implemented versus actually thinking about, okay, the population is here to stay. How do we
Yeah.
separate aid from Hamas from the population? The other component that I want to add is that there could be a way of enticing some of the participants of the old mechanism to be part of this with better vetting, better processes. It's difficult to see that happening now as they're saying there's no evidence that Hamas ever stole any aid. I mean, that's the part that's mind-boggling, is again an abdication of responsibility and accountability that got us to this mess. Nevertheless,
Has World Food Program made that comment explicitly?
funny you mentioned that because World Food Program was brought in a lot to supplant UNRWA, which in my opinion has been compromised by Hamas. World Food Program was a much more professional partner that the Israeli military actually appreciated working with. On the other hand, I think there's a desire by the UN headquarters to create this appearance of unity across all different agencies, that there isn't really theft of aid. So they're trying to
Uh,
protect UNRWA. So they're going about it by having a unified message as the UN. Whereas I still maintain, and I think there are many in the IDF and in the Israeli security establishment that would agree with this assessment, that the World Food Program is our best shot at working with a capable UN entity that is no stranger to working in conflict
Yeah.
zones where other militias in Darfur and in Sudan and in the Congo and in Mali and West Africa are seeking to control humanitarian aid as well. So that's where I think we need a hybrid approach to really surge food and aid into Gaza right now to bring down the acuteness of the crisis. And then as time goes on, I really think there are some capable private enterprise,
Yeah.
since that's the model that the US is standing behind. That's the model. And again, when I say this, people are now going to hear this and be like, oh my God, Ahmed is such a traitor. We hate him. This is what we have. I did not make the decision to go with private enterprise. If the people of Gaza are getting killed and losing their lives, then we need to work with what we have. So I want a better, more capable set of players who can design better routes, who can work with the IDF to actually maybe bring in less lethal means of controlling crowds, who can perhaps surge more capacity and maybe not have these bottlenecked, areas
Yeah.
where people have stampedes. And finally, maybe actually consider doing ID check. Like, if people know that I don't need to run first come, first serve, I don't need to go
Yeah.
crazy because I'm going to lose my spot in the line. I can show up at a longer window instead of a 1 or 2 hour window. I have a 6 hour window and I can go there, spread out the
Yeah.
crowd so that they're not 20,000 at a time, so that it's like 3,000 at a time. And I just present my ID. Here's my name. I got a package 3 days ago. Now I'm 3 days later. I'm due for another packet. Then there's a system and it lessens the need to act in this, oh my God, I gotta run, I gotta do this, which is A,
Exactly.
dangerous, B, dehumanizing.
So, Ahmed, before I let you go, we had an interesting and very sad exchange in the last week or two on WhatsApp about the food situation. And I asked you because I know you have many friends and family living, including a brother, living in the Gaza Strip still. I asked her, how are they doing? Are they able to get food? And you told me a story about one friend in particular and sent me some photos. Tell us about that. What happened with your friend?
Well, so this is a friend, very close friend, whose sister and her kids were like straight up haven't had food for like 4 or 5 days. And he's here in the United States as well. He actually came to the US the same year that I did. He was like, dude, I'm just desperate. Is there anything you know? And so some of the GHF aid was being resold, unfortunately. But he said, just any dollar amount, just do whatever you can and sending money there is really complicated. And so I have a friend in Egypt who's from Gaza, but he has the Bank of Palestine bank account, but also an application that he can actually virtually send money to someone in Gaza who has the Bank of Palestine
Right.
account and the app. So I sent $500 to the guy in Egypt, who then sent it to someone in Gaza. And every transit point, the money loses its, you know. And by the time it made it to Gaza, the raw amount that was in the application was $330.
Wow.
And with that $330, I got the bags that you saw, which under normal circumstances, those literally would cost 60 shekels. So $330, that's almost 1,100 shekels. The Palestinians use the Israeli currency. And so with 1,100 shekels, I was able to get them punk little things that literally normally would cost 50 to 60 shekels. But the family was so incredibly grateful because that fed them for 4 days.
I'm scared to ask what's happened since.
If you want to use the app versus if you want cash is king, cash is very scarce. If you have items are more expensive on an app than they are in cash. So one item, this cup of coffee, for example, could be just theoretically 50 shekels in person in cash or 80 shekels on an app. There's just all of these conversions is also this spread. There are people that there's been like this scumbaggery market that has come out and come up. And some suspect that Hamas also has a hand in these currency converters. Some people have been trying to get their cash because it's also dangerous and there's crime. Some people have been seeking to get their cash out. They don't want liquidity on hand. They want it in the bank account, but
Right.
it grows. That's a big investment. And they can transfer it outside of Gaza to foreign bank
Right.
accounts. So there's just like a whole other industry that has come up from the suffering and the misery related to the financial aspect of this.
Well, let's hope that this week, maybe even tomorrow, brings the beginning of a solution. Some
Inshallah.
kind of solution, some kind of new system, inshallah, indeed, because it has to change and it has to change very quickly. I'll be watching it closely. I know you will. And we will definitely be speaking again
Absolutely.
and hopefully with better news and analysis. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Vivian. Thank you.
I expect that you found Ahmed's comments thought-provoking, to say the least. I've included in the podcast notes today some recent and very insightful posts of Ahmed's on X. Follow him. He's positive, proud, and he sees Hamas for what it is, a savage death cult using its own people for political gain. At AFAL Khatib. You can see his handle on the screen now. Ahmed is an important voice that should be amplified because he is smart, informed, and focused on the well-being of civilians, not Hamas's political survival. But right now, I'd like to highlight a particular X post that Ahmed put up in recent days. The link is in the podcast notes. He posted a clip of a senior Hamas official speaking. We're going to roll that clip now. Because it's in Arabic, I will provide the translation of what this individual is saying. Here goes. Israel won't be on the map in 10 years, and that the people will look back and say thank you to those who launched the Al-Aqsa flood, the October 7th attack, because they wrote the first lines in Israel's annihilation. That's what the senior Hamas official has to say days after Hamas rejected the ceasefire proposal that had been approved by Israel and America. In the same post, Ahmed then continues to comment, and here's what he writes, quote, "The problem isn't that this is delusional rhetoric demonstrating the terror group's complete bankruptcy and psychosis-induced detachment from reality. Instead," he continues, "it confirms that no amount of death, destruction, hunger, suffering will ever cause the fascist entity in Gaza, Hamas, to stop the war it started, and that no threshold of Palestinian suffering or casualties will make Hamas budge on its hardened negotiating positions, necessitating a shift in strategy by Israel, the U.S., the Palestinian Authority, the Arabs, and the international community." Those are some pretty strong and powerful words. Sir Keir Starmer and President Emmanuel Macron would do well to really think hard about what Ahmed Al-Khatib writes. So would every Western nation that continues to exonerate the Islamist death cult Hamas for its deeply cynical tactics. The West is rewarding Hamas. Always remember, it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with us. So often, people who support the Israeli state say, who can we speak to? Who are our peace partners? Well, I'd start with people like Ahmed. There may not be many with his profile and knowledge and credibility and courage, but he can't be the only one. It's time to think outside the box. Thanks, as always, for being here. Please consider supporting our work with a paid subscription. Just go to stateoftel-aviv.com and follow the prompts, or you can contribute any one-time amount you choose at Buy Me a Coffee, Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. The link for that is on the screen here, now, and is also easy to find on our website. We'll be back soon, this week in fact, with additional interviews on this humanitarian crisis. Me, I'm off to Tel Aviv now, but midday Wednesday, to speak about these issues further on TV channel I-24. And perhaps I'll even post the clips tomorrow. In the meantime, stay tuned, stay safe, and stay cool. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager, who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.